Hello, just because something's new doesn't make it innovative. Innovation is the creation of net new value.
What we're experiencing here is the fourth industrial revolution. It's the fusion of technologies, actually blurring the lines between physical, digital, biological.
The bottom line is if you're not innovating, you're dying.
Welcome to the Superior Digital Show. My name is Jonathan DeCollibus, and I'm joined today by Mike Henebery from Exit Valhalla. This is our third podcast that we're doing together now in the series on wrestling with unicorns, how to build your startup, how to grow your startup, and how to exit your startup successfully. And today we're joined by the illustrious Dr. Dave Richards. He's an author, a speaker, a psychologist, a strategist, an entrepreneur himself, and he's a global thought leader in the space of innovation. He's worked with companies like Microsoft, Oracle, KPMG, Disney, Apple, the NHS, which we're hearing a lot about these days, 3M, Sun Microsystems, IBM, NASA, Philips, Qualcomm, and last but not least here, and very notably, the President of the United States, President Barack Obama, as well. So he's got quite the pedigree, quite the background. He is a co-founder of the MIT Innovation Lab. So he co-founded that in 1993 and co-directed it until 1996. And I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit here today. He is a PhD psychologist with years of board-level business experience and innovation leadership with a track record of multi-billion value realization. His specialism is in guiding clients' journey of cultural transformation and strategic value creation through business model innovation. He's the author of the book, The 7 Sins of Innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Dave Richards. Doctor, we've spoken a little bit previously, and I've got so many questions, so many thoughts, so many ideas, and I just wanted to direct sort of a few questions to you, broadly on the topic of innovation. I think we read a lot of articles and, Inc., Forbes, and the like, and they all have these unicorns, these Netflixes and the Ubers and the Airbnbs up there at the very top of their list when they talk about innovation. And I think there is a large pool of data that supports the idea that innovation itself can be, one of the most crucial, critical pieces in your business moving forward. Be it if you have a small SME or much larger company, much larger corporation moving into the new future that we're in. So if you could help us define, you're the expert in this. You're the, some would call you the god of innovation. Could you help us define what innovation actually is? There's so much out there. How do we understand what innovation actually is?
You're right. There are many, many definitions of innovation out there. And a lot of them are kind of inconsistent, and some of them don't even make sense. There's only one official definition of innovation, and it's in a document called the Oslo Manual, which was the document that was produced as a result of probably the most massive boondoggle that happened a couple of decades ago in Oslo, Norway, one of the most expensive places to have a beer on the planet. And we taxpayers from all over the world paid for thousands of academics and civil servants to go there and as I say, have a fantastic boondoggle for a couple of weeks to come up with the official definition of innovation. And by the way, it's crap. The official definition of innovation is complete crap. They define it as, quote unquote, a firm connecting something new to a marketplace. So for a start, it has to be a firm. So governments aren't allowed to innovate. Any other kind of, forget it. You just cannot innovate unless you're a firm. And further, unless you're connecting something to a marketplace. Now, what is that all about? Connecting something new. Tell you what, is new innovative? Just because something's new. Okay, market on my chest. Remember that business? Probably not. Hopefully we've all forgotten it. But there was a firm that was, actually marketing tattoos, put it on your chest, market our business. I mean, hello, just because something's new doesn't make it innovative, right? There's a lot of new shit happening all the time. So, just because something's new doesn't make it innovative. And finally, again, it implies that innovation is just driven by firms and it's all about marketplaces and so on. We need a much broader, much more inclusive definition of innovation, and they're out there. And in my book, I review all of them. And the one I select, I tweak it slightly, but what I like is a definition that innovation is the creation of new value. In fact, net new value, because you have to consider the value or the effort, the money, the resources, the time, everything that has to go into the investment to create something relative to then the ultimate value that's created. So I take that ratio, I call it return on investment. And I say if you've got fantastic return on investment, yay, we've innovated. If you've got negative return on investment, boo, we've innovated, right? So that's my definition. And, you asked me how I define innovation, but you also said, why does it matter in effect? Right? Why should firms care about it? And the point is, if you accept the definition of innovation is the creation, the manifestation, the realization of net new value in a business, then, hey, every single enterprise, I don't care whether it's a charity or a for-profit or, a government agency, no enterprise should exist unless it's in fact creating and delivering value to someone, right? A charity needs to sell something, right, to someone. It needs to provide value to the recipients of that charity. Any commercial enterprise, of course, needs to understand its customers and connect with them and build value, right, that customers experience. And if they're not doing that, they're not going to stick around. So the bottom line is, if you're not innovating, you're dying. And if you're not strategically, consciously thinking and planning how you're going to create more and more value every day, every week, every month, every year that your business lives, then you might as well pack it in. I say to people, hey, if you've lost the passion and if you're not trying to innovate, pack it in, mate. Retire. Time to go home, right? Put away the toys, right? Hand it over to someone else, right? Because if we don't have that passion for continual value creation, then why are we here? Innovation is essential. In fact, it's like the beating heart of any business. When my publisher asked me a few years ago to, would I write a book on innovation and entrepreneurship? I said, why? Why do we need another book on that? Peter Drucker, brilliant, genius, wrote the fantastic book. And Peter Drucker, of course, defined entrepreneurship as trying to drive innovation, right? I fundamentally agree with that definition. A successful entrepreneur is someone who's successfully producing ROI. And of course, there are lots of unsuccessful entrepreneurs around who are not successfully producing ROI. But, the bottom line is that's what it's all about. And entrepreneurship, of course, is just a form of leadership, right? It's leadership of value creation. It's leadership of innovation. And I think if I have any point to make, it's simply that we need a very conscious approach to that. And that's I just think we need to bring very conscious, strategic focus on creating value and driving successful ROI.
This idea of being obsessed with adding value, it seems to be underlying everything that you're saying here.
Hey, John, that's a beautiful way of encapsulating the core point. exactly about that. It's exactly about being obsessed about realizing value. And by the way, one of the key things I'd like to say is that the only aspect of our existence or our reality, our experience, the only place where we ever get to experience value or to deliver value is in relationships. So if you think about it, value is always experienced in a relationship, even like a relationship with this lovely glass of wine, right? Hang on for a second. You know, or if we're thirsty, a glass of water or whatever, right? But our relationship with anything that we consume, any experience that we consume, that's where we experience value, right? And it's also true that it's in our relationships with each other, our relationships with other people, that we can deliver value, right? That's where we can give of ourselves, so we can give value to other people. So it's in those relationships that value is given and received. And the next point I'd make is that, what is value, right? Economists would have us think, oh, value is money. Well, no, it's not. You know, money, I don't have any around. I got my phone, so I got Apple Pay, but I can't pull a coin out of my pocket and illustrate the point. But the point is, money, right, currency, a $50 bill or a 5-cent coin, whatever it is, it doesn't have any inherent value. I mean, maybe the coin does. You can scrape something with it, right, or whatever, or but the point is, money's a concept. Money is an agreement. Money is a psychological construct of civilization and humanity. And fundamentally, what is the value of money? The value of $10, I tell you what, the value of $10 to me right now is probably very different than it is, say, maybe if I fast forward a year and I'm salivating outside a fast food restaurant and whatever. So the value of money fluctuates. So my simple point that I'm belaboring is that money, the value of money is a psychological thing. Value is a psychological concept. It's a psychological experience. And fundamentally, I would always say, do you know what is far more important than money? Love. Right? Yeah, some people pay for love some of the time, possibly. Yeah, I'm not going there. But the point is, it's all about love. And really, the objective of any business should be to create a business model with products at the heart of it that customers love, and an experience, right? A broad experience of doing business with that business model that people love, right? And if you're going to do that, the only way you're going to do that is by creating a business that you have engaged people working in who love what they're doing. And, it all starts with the entrepreneur's love and passion for what they're doing. As Steve Jobs said, very much more eloquently than I am. Steve said, hey, find your passion, do what you love. And there's a key reason for that. If we're doing what we love, then we're going to love it. And guess what? Other people are going to love it, right? And if they don't love it, that's okay. They can go and love someone else. We're still going to be in our zone and love what we're doing. And the people who love what we're doing are going to zone with us. So it's all about getting in the zone, feeling the love, but fundamentally, it's all about creating love. And when you talk about value creation, you've got to be creating brands, experiences, products that people love. Otherwise, again, as I said before, if you're not doing that, may as well pack it up and go home.
If we can make a bridge between what you just said there, I think want to just direct this question to you, Mike. I think the word value, and then there's that other word, which is, I think, one of the primary, at least for the layman anyway, when we talk about exiting a company, there's that term valuation, right? That's used tremendously there. And I think if you could take us through the linkage between the inherent value that a company's bringing, be it, perceived or intrinsic, how does that actually translate over, from the perspective of an investor, a buyer, or, even just from the marketplace itself?
Yeah. Thanks, John. I mean, the reason we're here today is to help owner managers of SMEs think about how they can grow faster and create value. But I totally agree with what Dave is saying here about the fact that you've got to separate innovation from invention. Pure invention, if it's not enabling great ideas which enhance customer experience, move the business forward and deliver value, it's a useless invention. So innovation has to do all of those things. And I think in terms of bringing that into the world where people can understand the kind of innovations we've experienced in the last 5, 10, 15 years, now that we've got billions of people on the planet connected to each other by mobile devices and on social media platforms, we can access taxis, flights, music, films, games, all remotely. This is something we couldn't do when I was growing up, So in this last 15, 20 years, we've seen immense change. And of course, what we're experiencing here is the fourth industrial revolution. It's the fusion of technologies actually blurring the lines between physical, digital, biological. And the speed of this change is really exponential and beyond anything that any human has experienced ever in the history of time. And this is the reason why running businesses now is much, much harder than it's ever been before, because every single industry in every country is subject to disruption. So really what we're trying to help owner managers with is, in terms of today's podcast, is to understand the challenges that they're facing and then try and give them a route map as to how do you react to that, and one of the things I do is I look at the really successful people. Jeff Bezos, how does he react to this dimension that we're living in, this ubiquitous disruption? And some of the things he points to is, in terms of having a successful organization, I think everybody needs to think about these things. First thing he talks about is velocity of decision making. Slow will always be expensive. So maybe we've got to get used to making decisions with only 60 or 70% of the information we need to make the perfect decision. And guess what? Successful organizations reverse bad decisions quickly. I've seen that working with the best entrepreneurs. If they make a bad decision, they don't worry about it. They just change it. But one thing's for sure, moving slow is going to be expensive. So you've got to have quick decision making. I think it also means you've got to have some, I think, quite efficient hiring systems, because if the world's changing around us, we need to be improving the quality of our team to cope with that level of disruption. Always looking to improve the quality of the people in the management team, looking for the skill sets that are missing, looking for the areas where the markets we're in are subject to change, and what skill sets we need to address those market changes. So these are the practical ways in which I think owner managers need to address the situation. But ultimately, I think what Dr. Dave is talking about is also, of course, what Bezos loves to talk about, customer obsession. You have to be obsessed with what the customer needs, what the customer wants. Amazon Prime is perhaps a good example. The customers didn't even know they wanted it, but when Amazon invented that, sure, customers loved it. So all the time, and I think one really smart thing that Bezos talks about is, when you do your customer surveys, it's not just about the numbers and the percentages. You have to understand the nuances that lie behind it. And that really means having a passion and an obsession for delivering new experiences, which mean you've got a happier customer at the end of the day, whether that's a product or a service, it doesn't matter. You need a happier customer at the end of the delivery system.
If I could be allowed to just jump in on a couple of points, 100% agree, Mike, with what you're saying about the importance of people and having the right team. I mean, innovation never happens unless it happens because of people and their ideas, right? And it also never fails unless it fails because of people. But the other key thing, your point about timely decision making, absolutely critical. We looked at a lot of data in the MIT Innovation Lab across various member companies, and one of the interesting things we concluded was that a 6-month delay in a go, no-go decision on a new investment in a new innovation, a new R&D initiative, a 6-month delay killed the business case for 2 reasons. One, it doubled the cost of the R&D, and secondly, it halved the eventual market impact, the eventual commercial realization of value that happened from delivering. So it fundamentally, a 6-month delay is lethal, and I know that's old data in a sense from back in the 90s and 2000s and whatnot, but you know what? I believe it's still the case today. I think slow decision making is absolutely lethal, as you're suggesting.
Potentially even more today, with the speed that we all are moving at.
Pointing out there, John, just in terms of why is this world so complex? One of the things I picked up is that this whole idea around billions of people being connected on their mobile devices, the unprecedented processing power and storage capacity that we have access to. So the possibilities are being multiplied by emerging technological breakthroughs in areas as wide as artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotechnology, biotechnology, material science, energy storage, and quantum computing. What business does that not affect? I mean, it means this level of disruption is ubiquitous. It's everywhere around us. And something that Bezos said, which I really love actually, is that you cannot fight the future. If you fight the future, the wind's blowing in the wrong direction. You've got to create a tailwind, run with the future. And that means understanding what the future means for what customers want, what customers need to be happier, to be satisfied. And that's really what we're talking at the heart of innovation. But it's also just a way of demonstrating how challenging it is in 2020. Never mind mentioning the challenges of COVID on top of everything else that's going on around us. And I remember Alan Watkins doing a TED talk a few years back talking about this exponential change. So it's not new news, but it's not necessarily at the front of everybody's mind when you're an SME owner manager and you're wrestling with today's problems. Sometimes it's hard to come up to 35,000 feet and think about why you've got these challenges. And I think this ubiquitous disruption that we're facing at a speed with which it's never happened in human history is why we all need to help each other. In a way, it's why we've created Exit Valhalla.
Dr. Dave, a question on that. I think, potentially Mike as well, if you want to, both speak to this, you're touching on something that I know most SME owner managers, owner operators are really interested in, which is, how do we identify that? Because I think we all, can come to that understanding and that agreement that this is where, our focus needs to be at, right? How do we identify those, especially with the factors that you've just been talking about, Mike? There's a pace of change. I mean, the information rate, the information that's doubling, it's so rapid now. I heard recently it's almost every 13 or 14 hours, compared to 25 years at the turn of the century. And I think, it's tremendous. So how do we stay consistent with that, and how do we identify that?
So I think there's a complicated technical answer to your question as well as a simple human answer. The complicated and more technical answer is I think it's going to be about AI. And by the way, I prefer the term augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. And I think that what we need and where we're headed actually with AI is that we're going to augment human intelligence. We're going to sift through and summarize and bring the relevant information to the relevant decision in ever more efficient and effective way. Business owners can benefit anyone who's struggling with a decision, and yeah, the amount of information is overwhelming. So you're not going to absorb it all. But so that's the complex technology that I think is going to kick in and going to help. But the simple human answer as well is that I think what every business owner, well, even more than business owners, what everyone needs to do is think about all your key relationships and think about the value that you're delivering in those relationships and think about how you can increase it. You know, what can you do to improve it? What can you do to make it better? You know, whether it's faster, slower, you know, or whatever. What can you do to increase value? And in relationships you don't have. So a business should, of course, be thinking about its existing customers and relationships and looking for ways to enhance the value experience there. But it should also be thinking about what new customers aren't being served with the existing business model. And similarly, what potential new customers could be served by extending the business model in new directions by you know, pushing the frontiers. So I think, and that's in a sense, that's a very simple question, but it's also, of course, kind of, you know, it can be challenging. But I'd encourage everyone to look at the book, Blue Ocean Strategy, and the more recent version of that book. What's it called? White Ocean, whatever. But the point is, we need to look outside of the red ocean spaces and look for ways that we can change the game and find new ways to express and deliver value in existing and new relationships.
So this comes down to listening, thinking creatively, and really humanizing the entire, you know, interaction. But I think also what you're saying as well is leverage technology in that. So, you know, using that augmented, which I think I'm going to steal that from you, by the way. I love that. It really makes it much more palatable. So, you know, really bringing in that augmented intelligence, that artificial intelligence, as they would say, to help filter through the data and look at, you know, what's the reactions, what are the feedbacks, what are people bringing. Mike, do you have some thoughts on that you could bring into this question?
Yeah, I think, you know, we sometimes we can overcomplicate these things. And one of the reasons we set up our consultancy is to help owner managers to simplify the solutions, you know, so we're not trying to overcomplicate things here. Frank Kern, who, you know, I love to follow, you know, and in a kind of a way, it gave me the idea of some of the original ideas, you know, for what we're doing. And we collaborate with his company right now. He often says that when he's helping a business, it boils down to the company having too many offers or you know, so it's too complicated, or they need to have more offers, or sometimes they've actually stopped doing something that was successful because they got sidetracked by a new idea, and actually they stopped doing something that brought in business and actually worked fine, you know, in the past. So sometimes the fixes aren't that complicated, but I do think that what we're referring to earlier, some of these ideas that Jeff Bezos was promoting in terms of how we deal with the speed of change in today's society, having at the front of mind rapid decision making, the quality of the people in the team. How do we look to enhance our team every year? How do we look to enhance our team every quarter? You know, in this world is moving so quickly that if the team in your business is the same as it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, it probably means you're not innovating fast enough. And look, you know, maybe certain people could be better in different roles, you know, but it's almost certainly the case every year that if you brought somebody in from the outside, you could enhance your offering. But of course, figuring out how to do that is a whole separate issue. Something we might cover on another podcast, John. Actually, the whole issue of team interaction and culture, you know, which is something we can perhaps pick up on separately. But of course, as Dave was saying, you know, good innovation at the heart of that is relationships and therefore people and the way we communicate with each other. And as I believe Dave has also said, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Possibly my favorite line of his book. But it's so true. You know, we see this in business all the time. You know, and this is why I wanted to do this podcast, because I wanted to help SME owner managers think about how they create the right culture. Because at the heart of driving the business forward faster has to be having the right culture. And, you know, something I often used to come across in business, particularly in my private equity years in the late 90s and the early 2000s, you'd be talking to somebody, sometimes somebody in my team, you know, and they'd say, well, but that's the way we've always done it. Well, yeah, but is there a better way of doing it? That's the question we need to be asking ourselves. And another one that, again, quoting Jeff Bezos, but he does have some very good quotes. If a middle line manager says, yeah, we got the wrong outcome, but we followed the process, so that's okay. No, it's not okay. Question the process. Question the process. Don't defend a bad outcome because we followed a process. We need to be reinventing our processes as well all the time.
Well, just to pick up on that a little bit, yeah, I mean, it is always all about the people. And when you're talking about an organization, whether you're just focusing on the leadership team or you're talking about the wider organization and the whole culture, fundamentally, it comes down to how people are engaged or whether they're more likely disengaged. Because when I look at organizations, if you take an objective look at most organizations, you see a lot of people are really disengaged. And in fact, recently, was it Gallup? I think it was Gallup that did a big global survey, and they concluded that I think globally about 30% of people of the workforce are engaged and 70% are disengaged. Luckily for the U.S. and a number of other Western countries, the numbers are higher for us. So it's like 41%, something like that, are engaged. But still, you think about it, if that means that 2/3 of your workforce are fundamentally disengaged, they're showing up for a paycheck, they're showing up to meetings and taking notes, but hello, what are they contributing, right? Are they asking any good questions? Are they offering any good ideas? You know, it's a pretty sad state of affairs that so many people are actually disengaged. And of course, in the pandemic now, the problem is probably even exacerbated. But, you know, you dig into the psychological reasons, the root causes for why people are disengaged. For one thing, they're not feeling the love, right? They've lost it somewhere along the way. They might have loved their job when they first got it, or they might have loved the idea of the company, but somewhere along the way, they've lost their passion. And so, you know, you got the wrong cook in the kitchen in that sense. Maybe it's time for them to move on, or maybe it's, you know, you talk about changing people, and I totally agree with that. I think bringing new people into teams is a really positive thing, but also people, of course, constantly change, and people constantly need to change. It's part of being a healthy human being, right? Not only physically, but mentally and in a holistic sense. We need to be constantly changing. My dear old granddad, my mom's dad, used to say, learn something new every day. Fantastic, wise advice. And I've tried to do that. And often, you know, as I'm falling asleep, I try and reflect, what have I learned today? You know, we need to create cultures of encouraging change and cultures of encouraging confrontation. You know, that people don't kind of complacently accept the status quo and, oh, well, we followed that process and nothing happened or shit happened, right? We need cultures where people confront each other, engage in creative conflict. You know, Pat Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of Teams, all of that kind of thing. You know, Lee's book on 9.5 things we do differently if Disney ran our hospital, or indeed any organization. You know, all of those things, we need to constantly embrace them and get people to think out of the box and to engage each other. to improve, and to have that mindset of constantly looking to try and find ways to create value in every relationship. Because coming back to that whole concept about creating value in relationships, and of course, initially I focused on the customer, but a key point is each and every one of us should be a servant leader, right? So we should all, any leader of any organization should try and make every other person in the organization a leader, right? And a servant leader who's constantly thinking, how can I serve this person? How can I create value in this relationship? So we need to think as leaders, and fundamentally, just look at each other as everyone is a customer, right? We are all customers of each other, whether we're the external paying customer or whether we're the, doesn't matter whether if I'm maybe the accountant in the business, everyone in the business is my customer. I'm maybe the HR manager, everyone is my customer, right? I'm the CEO, everyone is my customer. I'm the servant leader, CEO, everyone in this business is my customer. So that's just a change of mindset. But hey, change can happen just like that, right? We just need, and the most important change often is just a change in mindset. But yeah, bringing in fresh blood is a great idea too, often. And sometimes it is time for people to move on. I've seen that time and time again. Almost every organization I've ever worked with, we've all, inevitably you find someone whose passion has just sort of gone past its use-by date, and it's time for them to find their passion elsewhere. And it's a win-win for everyone, for them to move on and find greener pastures.
Something else, John, there I think is worth picking up on. Maybe it's an extension to your last question about value creation. Something that struck me is that as we've moved from this third industrial revolution, which was really about electronic and information technology at the back end of the 20th century, to the fourth industrial revolution that we're experiencing now. If you look back to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the most successful companies, the Hanson Industries, for example, what were they doing? They were really leveraging assets. And yes, you can make a good return on investments leveraging assets. But increasingly what we're doing to create value now, as this fourth industrial revolution unwinds, is we're leveraging intellectual property, IP. So I came up with this concept of, and it's actually a chapter I'm yet to write, but it's the final chapter, and it's going to engage one or two of the ideas that Dr. Dave is talking about here, if he'll give his approval. But I'm essentially saying we're goodwill hunting. That's what we're doing. Which was a great movie, by the way.
Great movie, and it's a great term. It's a great phrase. So well done for picking up on that.
I have to do this. I have to play devil's advocate. I don't agree with the question I'm going to ask, but I know there's going to be somebody out there who will be watching this who will have this question. Because I'm personally aligned with what you're saying, but I have to ask this. What about not rocking the boat? So let's say, well, we're doing great. We're profitable. We're growing. We're expanding. Why should we innovate on what's already working?
I do agree with the another way of saying the same thing is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I agree with that. And I've seen lots of organizations make the mistake of spending lots of money, lots of effort to so-called, fix something that wasn't broken in the first place and shouldn't have been messed with. So there is wisdom beneath that concept. But at the same time, if you think of yourself, you think of your business as a boat, and you want to stay afloat. You're moving in a particular direction. You got a certain number of people in it. You're hopefully accomplishing something. But if you're not thinking about the future, and you're not thinking about that big wave that's just over there, that's going to completely flip your boat, If you're not looking at the fact that just another mile down the river there's a massive waterfall that you're about to go over, or if you're, there's things you need to be thinking about that are related to things like fourth industrial revolution and a lot of the a lot of the amazing things that are happening in the world and things that we haven't even anticipated. What's the next massively disruptive technology, etc. So if you're not thinking about that, then again, enjoy your little boat ride, but don't expect it to last forever.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, what I would add, John, is really you're balancing off complacency versus risk taking. And obviously, as a private equity guy, I believe in risk taking. And I think what we've been talking about here really is that the difference between innovation, where you create value, and innovation, where you don't, is a well-judged risk. But deciding not to take any risks at all, for me, is complacent, and in today's world is almost certainly going to end up in an unhappy ending because of the pace of change that's ubiquitous, surrounding us everywhere, all the time. So standing still for me doesn't sound like a palatable option in any industry. Doesn't mean to say take an ill-judged risk. And of course, the great organizations take well-judged risks, and that's what innovation is about.
And I have to jump in here and blatantly plug my book and say that the seventh sin of innovation, 7 of 7, is in fact comfortable complacency, which I define. Well, it comes in 2 forms. One is arrogance. A lot of companies, they're just in their little boat and they don't want to rock the boat. They just want to, coast to retirement, whatever. Right? Sell the business, get out, happy days. But the other, almost, I think, more prevalent form of comfortable complacency is actually arrogance. It's companies, I won't name any, but, we all know who they are, but big, huge brands, big, successful companies who are humongously successful. And they think, we don't need to change. We are innovative. Right? We're fantastic. And our processes are great, and this is great, and that's great. And quite, the reality is that that's why they're not going to be the big, humongously successful companies in another decade. End of. Right? So comfortable complacency is the 7th sin.
So there are going to be inherent risks, and I think, as what you said there, Mike, that really underlines, I think, what you just said there about they're coming in with potentially this arrogance or this fear of taking the risk, but not innovating is, in a sense, a decision to take a risk as well. So I guess how do we process those inherent risks that come with these innovations that go into these new ideas, new implementations, these new delivery methods, or new sales approaches, or whatever it might be in? How does an SME owner sift through that and then potentially hedge the downside in that process?
Well, I guess we've got to have this culture of innovation. What does that mean? It really means having a team, a collection of people within your business who are constantly reviewing, sifting through, sorting the wheat from the chaff on the new ideas. And depending on the pace of change in your industry, maybe that's a weekly meeting or it's a monthly meeting. And it depends on, every industry is going through a different experience in terms of the pace of change. But if you've got no new ideas coming through the funnel, then I think you're in the camp of complacency. And as Dave just pointed out, doing nothing is a risk itself. So Bezos said the same. Slow decision making, which effectively means doing nothing, is going to be expensive. So we have to embrace the pace of change that's happening around us and make sure our organizations reflect that. And one element of that is having an internal team and a system and a process for comparing and contrasting the risks of new projects, new ideas, new products, new services. But if we're not considering any, if we're taking the position that what we've always done is the best way forward, I would argue in today's world that's a pretty big risk in itself.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing I'd like to say is that having been involved in lots of decisions over the years, decisions, I'll just broadly summarize them and say, do you go left or do you go right? One thing I'll say with a broad sweeping analysis of all of it is that often, they're ultimately, with hindsight and everything, you can look back and you can say, yeah, we could have gone left, we could have gone right. But the bottom line is, I think a good leadership team, and in fact, a good broader team, a solid enterprise, can make either decision work. You can go left and make it work. You can go right and make it work. What you can't make work is standing still, because you will get run over by that fast-moving, train that's just about to come right up your what and bowl you over. And so a decision is required. And I love what Mike said earlier, that a really, truly agile, smart organization is also going to be constantly surveying reality, constantly gathering intelligence from all sources, and therefore constantly reviewing decisions and saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to be precious about this. I know the board decided last week that we're going to go left, but now it's obvious we should have pivoted right. Fine, let's go right. Be lean, be agile. Got to be a lean, mean decision-making machine. So just keep moving.
So as you're talking about surveying the landscape, right, to identify, and I want to go back to your original definition of this, which is that net new value defined and measured in ROI terminology, and using that. So to ask a question which is also combined with the speed and the decision-making, ability there, how long do you give an idea, before you say, well, great, this hasn't been ROI effective for a week, a month, a year, 2 years. I think there's an obvious sort of understanding that at a certain point, but I guess that's the first part of my question is, really, when do you cut it off?
Well, that's one of the key things that differentiates really great innovation machines, innovation factories, from innovation factories that don't manage to do anything. And that is the ability to, what I put it simply, it's the ability to kill good ideas quickly. Because the reality is, the longer an idea kicks around, the longer someone, or maybe a whole team or a whole load of people, are going to be spending time thinking about it and developing it and doing stuff. And it's going to be time and money and attention. The quicker you say, you look at a particular idea and you say, no, look, guys, it's a great idea, but the time isn't right. Maybe next year we'll look at it again. Or it's just a stupid idea and here's why, or whatever, but the quicker you kill that idea, and a lot of them, they're going to be good ideas. The other key discipline that a lot of is lack, SMEs, but even multinational corporations lack the discipline of focus. Okay, Steve Jobs used to always say, focus, focus, focus. Right? It's say no to 1,000 things. Those are very wise words, because the key thing is the company that can essentially tune out all the noise, all the great idea, all the good ideas, right? But focus on the great idea. Focus on the idea that's going to become our next gold brick, that's going to build, a foundation of fundamental, solid value for this enterprise. Focus on those, and yeah, I wish I had an easy formula for you to say, oh yeah, it's X plus this and minus Y and whatever, and that makes it happen. There's some art to it, there's some science to it, but fundamentally, the ability to focus and reject. I mean, nobody can do everything, so we have to prioritize. We can't try to do everything, or we will do nothing well, right? So that's a key message for any SME. Multinationals, of course, have the luxury of creating new divisions and units and subsidiaries and this, that, and the other thing. But for an SME, if you're not focused, you're in a bad place, and it's going to get worse, right? So you need to focus.
To go back to that boat analogy again, because I loved what you did with it. It really painted some beautiful imagery there. I think there's also the piece to this as well, that when the tide rises, all the boats rise with it. And so I can imagine that an innovation, let's say on the product side or on the service side, is going to have a direct value impact crossover into the into the marketing, the sales team, even the management, the accountant. I mean, I feel like there's some big crossover that really happens across the board with that. Could you, either of you on that, just to sort of expound on what you've seen when innovation happens, even on one small part of a company?
Well, what I was thinking of there, John, in terms of what Dave has just been talking about, is more how do we encourage a culture of balanced risk taking, really, and we were saying, there isn't really a formula for that, but I mean, in private equity, the way we used to do it, you'd be looking at hundreds, sometimes thousands of possible deals in 1 year, but obviously you've got to filter those down to the deals you can possibly win, so that probably gets rid of quite a large percentage of the deals, and then obviously we'd be looking at the return on investment, and making our assessment of risk. And I think that really organizations, SMEs, have to do a similar thing with their new projects. They have to figure out what the cost of getting that new product or service to market is, and what the upside, if they get this right, how that sits against the cost. And then you figure out, is that a risk reward we can live with? So for me, I think a lot of what we're talking about today comes down to engaging your people. I thought that was a brilliant point that Dave made earlier, that maybe 2/3 of the workforce is disengaged in the majority of companies. So I think the first thing you've got to think about is, have I got a disengaged workforce? How do I engage them better? How do I encourage a culture of balanced risk taking? I'm a private equity guy. I like to say NASA can see my balls from space. Of course, it's a slight exaggeration, but I take risks. I mean, we're only alive for a finite time. For me, taking no risk I don't see the point. But not everybody agrees with that. Not everybody agrees that NASA can see my balls from space either, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think, just to pick up on that point, not the balls, but the point about risks, I think that one of the risks that most members of most teams need to be willing to take more is just the risk of putting themselves out there, the risk of potentially looking silly, right? The risk of sharing the idea that's a half-baked cake that might make people think you're a couple of bricks short of a full load. And the reality is, I think we have to create team environments and cultures where people feel safe. So there has to be a level of trust, right? There has to be the feeling that, hey, we're all in this together. We're in the boat together. No one's going to get thrown out because they suggest something that other people then think is stupid. So we're just going to throw you overboard. So, I think that a lot of it comes down to those human relationships, and it comes down to building trust, building the real strength of relationship. so that we can put ourselves out there and we can share the crazy idea. Because hey, you know what? Your half-baked cake plus my half-baked cake might make a fantastic, beautiful wedding cake. So that's how we need to approach it.
Just in terms of some takeaways that we could summarize, I think, on this, would there be anything that you would want to add to the conversation, Mike or Dr. Dave, on this?
Yeah, I think we'll cover it in another podcast in more detail. But I think one of the ways that we cope with balanced risk taking is building groups of people that have a different approach of assessing risk, so that we get, if you had 5 Mike Heneberys in the team, it wouldn't be a good idea. It would be taking too much risk. So you need balance in that team. You need a brakeman, somebody who can see the downsides of doing something and maybe hold back from the crazier ideas, the half-baked cakes, and we can cover that in another podcast in more detail. But that's definitely the way that successful companies do it. They build teams with a balance of skill sets to improve their chances of ensuring that the risk analysis comes up with the right red light, green light decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, IDEO has made a whole business about identifying what they call the 10 faces of innovation, which they say are required to defeat the devil's advocate. And my view is that actually devil's advocates are another face of innovation that actually is important and is a valuable part of a diverse innovation culture and team. And there are a few more that I think are missing, including cheerleaders and champions. But I talk about all that in my book. But yeah, the other thing I would say is, overall, I feel that a lot of this is about bringing more consciousness to leadership, bringing more, leading conscious innovation to me is a really important concept. And of course, leadership is all about strategy but I think taking a really conscious approach to strategic leadership and focusing on innovation, focusing on value creation and continuing to evolve your business model and evolve your culture and organization so that you have ever increasing ability to deliver value and to innovate more. To me, that's what it's all about. So, I'd be glad to talk more anytime about that. That's what the so-called 7 sins of innovation are, just 7 aspects of human psychology that tend to trip us up. But I'd hasten to point out that just like any coin, on the one side of the coin, there's a sin. On the other side of the same coin, there's a virtue. So, it's also, for leaders, it's about building a virtuous organization that has the real strengths and capabilities to sustainably, strategically innovate. So I'd be happy to talk with you guys anytime. I really enjoyed this. So thanks for that.
Well, Dr. Dave, I tell you, we've got to schedule, we got to put something in on the calendar to go over your book. I've got the 7 chapters here in front of me, and I know there's value there to be explored, and I would love to hear, live to hear, your thoughts on that. So we can definitely discuss. I would love to put that together. We've covered some very in-depth ground here, and I would say for those of us who have been in innovation mode, take down notes on this, listen to Dr. Dave, listen to Mike, pick up Dr. Dave's book, The 7 Sins of Innovation, pick up Wrestling with Unicorns, start metabolizing. As Dr. Dave said, the arrogance of thinking that we have all the answers now is never going to be the path towards greatness. And so I know that's why we're here. That's why we're watching this. That's why we're even putting this out, is that we're obsessed by this, obsession to succeed and to add value and to leave a legacy. So, first of all, gentlemen, thank you so much for, being with us. I just want to say, just thank you for your time and for investing in this. This has been a lot of fun. I've gotten some tremendous value from this. And I guess what I would say just to our audience right now is, first of all, go visit exitvalhalla.com. If you're considering a startup, if you're considering taking your business from the growth to the exit successfully, you don't want to do that alone. You want to do that with a team who understands exactly what the pitfalls are, what the paths to success are, so that you don't have to guess. And for those of you who are interested in really taking innovation to the next level, and you're really looking for that serious partner in there, I would highly recommend visiting DrDaveInnovation.com and reach out and see if he's got the availability for you, because it really is just the opportunity of a lifetime to be able to interact with these legends in the business space. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. Looking forward to doing this again sometime soon. Thank you so much.